everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Leah Frieden, and it is my pleasure to welcome you all to the Fayetteville Public Library. And I'd like to welcome those watching through live stream as well. And to assist our at-home viewers, when we get to the question and answer session, please raise your hand and we'll bring you a microphone. The folks at home will not be able to hear you if you don't use a microphone when you ask your question. Before you leave tonight, please take a moment to fill out the evaluations that we've left for you. Those help us to plan for future programs. And many thanks to the University of Arkansas Department of Anthropology for partnering with us on this program. And I'd like to go ahead and turn things over to them.
Well, thank you all for coming today. I just wanted to do a quick introduction to Dyan. So Dyan Youpee is the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer and also the Cultural Resources Director for the Fort Peck Reservation. And so Dyan is not planning to just talk about her role herself, but about how her father created the department and how for her taking care of cultural resources is a way of life. It's not just a job. So please welcome me, or welcome us, and help us welcome Dyan.
So I for sure just wanted to talk about how I've been. Is this on? Is it? Okay. I just for sure wanted to talk about how I came into this profession, this role. And I know that a lot of spectators are in archaeology or anthropology. So I hope that the question and answer is more fun than my small speech here. But I made bullet points. Otherwise, I will go down a rabbit hole real fast. And I don't think we have that much time. So first and foremost, all of the credit and acknowledgement goes to my dad. He was an advocate, and the main story that I like to share about him is he was 21 years old at Wounded Knee in 73. He made this revolutionary change in his life that he wanted to protect sacred sites and Native American rights. And that one day his children wouldn't have to look over their shoulder or sneak in a Sundance tree or a ceremonial practice, that we could just practice freely, pray freely, and then teach our kids and their kids and their kids. So the whole point of it, I believe his life change was for those yet to be born. And then I have a whole story of why I brought a cradle board from Montana, and I made this when I was 21. So every once in a while I'll reflect on why this is here, and it's symbolic to my livelihood. So having watched him grow, he raised me, and a lot of my days in as small as being in Head Start was he dragged me to his office, and I had a small bed next to his desk. My Head Start session was in the afternoon, so he had secretaries fixing my hair, washing me up, and sending me off to school. I remember staying late at night with him. He was talking to agencies, museum curators, institutions, just trying to get our things back, our ancestral remains, and then protecting sacred sites. So I've witnessed this work, CRM work, all my life. I've witnessed him having challenges with archaeologists, anthropologists, the interpretation of our culture, our practices, what it means to us, and then trying to put it on paper, trying to put it into policy and law, and then protect it. I've been creating sites since I was a little girl. Also with my other siblings, we've been creating stone features on the land, effigies, mounds, cairns since we were little. This is a practice that's nothing close to being historic. This is something that we do every day, or every time we have a loss, or every time we have an event. There's a creation, something that's embedded in the land, and that's embedded generational knowledge. Also, when one of the things that is the biggest part of my job, the THPO job, is, and it's not necessarily supposed to be a responsibility of a THPO, but NAGPRA, getting human remains back to our ancestral homelands. Not only that, funerary objects, or just objects in general. The best way that I can describe the importance, and maybe some of you have different views, but the importance of bringing ancestral remains home is is the feeling that I feel, and I wish I can share and give that feeling to other people so that they can understand. Other institutions who maybe want to hold on to those objects a little bit longer, who maybe want to study them and don't understand the importance of giving them back, who are a little bit resistant to the NAGPRA law, is that when they come home, they come off the plane and I drive and I see the big sign that says, "Welcome, you are now entering the Indian reservation." You know, when I get that much closer to my people, to our homelands, well, what is now our homelands, my brothers and other honorary people, men, warriors, they set up the burial grounds, the protocols, whichever. And during that whole time, once those remains hit the earth, once they go into the hole, to me, I feel a heartbeat in the earth, and it goes all the way across the Indian reservation, and it tries to find the family that it's connected with. The person, the great-grandmother, the great-great-grandpa, whoever's remains those were that were taken from the reservation and put into studies, into museums, into collectors' hands, into people's basements. That heartbeat tries to search for that. And I tell my people, I tell my community members, my staff, my interns, you know, and most of all, curators and archivists. I say when that heartbeat happens, that family could be having a hard time because they don't have that connection. They don't have that piece of identity that's home with them. You know, they didn't get to do the proper grieving down their lineage because they're gone. These people were gone. They were studied. So when that heartbeat finds them in months from now, we're going to watch that family thrive. Should they be having a hard time, now they're going to thrive. Now their children are going to speak the language. Now their children are going to understand dances and songs. Just because that one person that we got to bring home was a heartbeat that sent out and healed their lineage. That's how important it is. That's what we fight for. That's the whole point of wanting to express the intangible connection that we have to our land and the things that are embedded in the ground. You know, this is the entire importance of, even if it's a little piece of material that was with a burial, you know, that little piece of material means something to that person. That little bead, that little piece of beadwork, the leather, the piece of pipestone, it means something to that person, and it has to come home. So those, as challenging as it is, it's so much rewarding, you know, in itself. So one of the successful things that I'm most proud of for our people is that because we're on the Indian reservation, we exercise our sovereignty as much as we can. So we don't have a museum curator and archivist then, and we also didn't have a facility as well. So we've created those things in the time of myself being a director. We don't operate. We often are excluded from certain grants because we don't operate like a normal museum or an archive. Every first rainfall that comes, every time the first lightning hits the ground and the rain that follows, we take all of our feathers outside and we wash them. I know there's not another institution that would do that. There's too many protocols, no, we can't do that. We don't want to damage the feathers. But that's not how we've been taking care of our items. We know how we take care of our feathers, and that's how we were taught. That's embedded knowledge. You know, the moccasins, the rattles, all of that is open. Some of them are in cases, but when we have our little kids, and this is one of the cutest stories and one of the biggest hopes that I have for our people, is when we had the little kids come in, we opened up a drawer, there was a rattle there was little moccasins. The little girls, they scooped up the little baby moccasins, the little quilled ones, and just, oh, for cute, you know, just the emotion that they had, like if it wasn't little Barbie doll, you know, feet or something, but they picked them up and just shaky put them back down, and then they giggled about it. So cute. Just the respect and just knowing, like, I'm going to be a mom one day, and I want my baby to have nice, pretty little moccasins like that. Just them wanting to have a little doll, it's embedded in them. It's something that's within their memory, their genetic memory, to react to items like that. The rattles, this boy, I've yet to find out, remember his name, but they were all like 5 or 6. And this boy comes in and he looks at that rattle, and I tell the teachers, like, it's okay if these are all appropriate, to be out here. But the little boy picked up the rattle and he put it to his face and he whispered to it. I don't know what he said. I don't know where he learned that from. I don't know who taught him. And then he put it down. But ever in my heart did I ever think, I don't know how this little boy was raised. I don't know what his background is. I don't know what his parents raised him as, but just that alone, how quick that was to whisper to that rattle and then put it down. I don't know if he said, I'm coming back for you, or what are you, or who are you, or I know who you are, or even say a prayer and put it down. But that's how I know that there's hope. There's hope that people don't even have the utmost cultural upbringing, but our culture finds its way back into people, even kids who didn't have a cultural upbringing. So those small pieces of hope are always for the children. Our culture comes back through the kids, and we do this work especially for the ones yet to be born. It's not for us, it's not for me, it's not for my grandparents. It's to respect ancestors who fought for our existence to be today. And we do this work. We go through this hardships and the struggles and the successes for the ones yet to be born. Also, for sacred sites, since we get to utilize our sovereignty and I get to utilize our practice archaeology, how it benefits us. We tailor archaeology to the tribes. So whatever we deem is a sacred site, it's a sacred site. If we go off the Indian reservation, you have so many different protocols to what a site can be. There has to be so many debitage or flakes or whichever to deem it a sacred site, or to a site in general. There's criteria to the National Register. We don't exercise that on the Indian reservation. Though many people have passed through the Indian reservation now, many different walks of life and different tribes and backgrounds and different time frames, whatever is sacred, and that's it. That's a practice of sovereignty. So I get to practice archaeology with that in mind, that even if our grandparents, our great-grandparents during the start of the reservation period had created a site, should they have lost a horse or a family member and created a cairn, even though it's not 50 years old, it's still sacred, and that's going to be protected. So these are proactive solutions to exploring professions where it once was hurting us. And now that we stepped into professions, now that some of us have succeeded in an academia world and brought that back to the Indian reservation, we practice it in a proactive light. And so that's one of the proudest moments that I have for our tribe and our legislative level. We also have created a cemetery that has a specific area just for repatriations, because at one time we never want development to destroy sites again or destroy burial grounds again. So there's a designated area, and Fort Peck practices that. So anybody that's still out there waiting to be repatriated, there's always going to be a space for them. And for my field staff, and this is probably a question, well, I would hope that a question like this comes up. My field staff, the ones that I teach to go walk out into the field and start flagging out sacred sites, they're the ones that identify for this office. Oftentimes they ask, do you know what this site means? Do you know what that means? Stone features, effigies, and I don't. I don't know what every single site is. That's quite a difficult one, and I don't think I'll know at the end of my lifetime. I'd like to think so, but I won't. So we have to remember to utilize cultural practice. We can't talk about it and not do it. So when they walk up to a site, a stone feature, utilize your cultural practices and pay homage to that site and ask it. If we're talking about our objects, our trees, our plants, cultural practice in general is such a way of life, it's so alive, then treat it as such. So you ask the site, what do you mean? Who made you? Why were you created? And then be open to accepting the knowledge. Why was it created? It may be a woman's site, a man's site, a buffalo site, something beyond your comprehension, and something maybe not meant for you to know. But if you want to know something so bad, then you would ask Creator. That's what's instilled in us. So I noticed that there's a lot of research questions out there in anthropology. What is this vessel? What is this pipe? What is this piece of wood? Why did that seed go there? Why is there depressions here? Who was buried there and why? To us, there's ceremonies for that. And we're not mediums. We're not fortune tellers. We can't seek answers that doesn't belong to us. But in a world of that, where we know that once we obtain that knowledge, it's a benefit to our people, then we'll get the answers. All we have to do is ask. So asking a pair of moccasins, talking to it like it's alive, that's real. It's very real in our lives. It's very real to our children, to our elders, to our people in general, but most importantly to a THPO role. We often feel that we fight people all the time, agencies, development, structures, and rehabilitative areas. We're fighting stadiums and roadsides, tourist attractions, just to protect the natural world, because that's what we work most with. So all through the time of talking to people on campus and Molly carting me around to multiple people. So I'm glad I got to talk to a lot of people of the university. But I know that one of the biggest struggles going through the academia and getting the anthropology degree and even sitting in my master's for CRM, there's always this fight. It's a different disagreement in my head and with other people of that science versus culture all the time. That science can always justify a cultural practice, and one example that I gave, well, there's two, but one example is a little whirlwind. And to us, it's like a grandma. A little whirlwind is a grandma. That's a being. It's an actual creation. It's a being. So it has something significant to it, and it has a purpose. Whether a little kid will touch it and it still swirls around, then it was a blessing, but it meant something. It's to keep what people call an imagination, but it's an intangible connection. It means that somebody placed something realistic into this being and created it into something. And it may be just in scientific world, this corner of a building where wind comes, and of course it's going to swirl because that's the scientific reasoning for it. So there's always a difference. It's sort of writing a fence line in this job, is remembering there's a science, but remembering that I'm a cultural practitioner first, and that fence line is to bridge a gap between the people I work with, the ones that I serve, that I educate, and then also remembering, where do I come from? What's my first belief system? What do I ground myself in? And how do I choose to live and walk my life here after? Because I'm going to leave all of my studies here. I'm going to leave everything here once I go to another place, another side. The other one that was most challenging to understand is the stars. We believe that we come from the star people, that when we look up, our relatives are up there. We have a connection. Our relationship to spiritual connection and our relationship to the natural world and other deities, our spatial relationship is not horizontal, it's vertical. We're from the core of the earth up to the sky, the cosmos, the universe. We come from the star people. And I remember in 5th grade, or I was 11 years old, I always knew that when we look to the sky, the stars, this is where we come from. We have relatives up there. And then in 5th grade, getting the packets on NASA. What is a star? Well, here's some photos of stars. And it's gases, it's space trash, some metals, some broken up, stones, rocks, different chemicals. I mean, it's a huge culture shock. And that comes in academia, that comes in our books, so there has to be a balance. And this is where THPOs are a huge asset to the tribe, because we do educational outreach, because we're the ones talking to these sites. We interpret some of our history and we share it with people, and we have opportunities like this. But one of the hardest parts is knowing that influenced my life as well. And I think that without that influence, I'm not able to ride this fence line safely, without jumping off one or the other, is knowing that what I was taught since I was small and what I believe in, but also trying to parallel a scientific world, that's what a star looks like, other than this is what I believe. The other thing is, I believe I came from the Black Hills. I believe I came out of Wind Cave. That's where my people came from. And the buffalo housed us. The buffalo took care of us and they clothed us. I know that I don't have to accept where people think about human evolution. I know that I don't have to accept it or believe it, but I value it because it also shares about a lot of other people. Where do other people come from? And I realized that spiritual foundation, cultural foundation is something so difficult in a position like this, because sometimes I feel that in order to protect sacred sites, sacred objects, I feel that sometimes we have to sell our culture in order to make somebody a believer, and at some point, it's not going to happen. At some point, I wish I could just show people. I wish I could show people that should I be able to talk to my dad or my ancestors right now, I wish that I can show you guys the light that comes from my spirit, the opening within our crown, and where it shoots up into the sky, into the stars. And when I say that this is sacred, I wish I can show you, the light, what it does, how it brightens me. And then I can have these conversations, but I can't put that on paper. I try to find other books and resources and who else mimic this, who else parallels what I feel. And it's hard, but another THPO would understand, because they have to fight the same thing with their tribe, their region, their shelters, their sites, and it becomes a tough thing, but we have more rewarding moments, where we get to educate people. And hopefully when other people go into archaeology, anthropology, museum curating, archiving, they hear things like this and they become more open-minded to other perspectives, and that there's more collaboration and whichever. But I think I just wanted to end with, didn't want it to be a sad note, but so my dad had raised me this way, to be a THPO, and I believe I'm the only one in the nation where a THPO raised a THPO. So I'm very, very fortunate. I believe I had an advantage at this job, this profession. I've heard the language, the verbiage all my life. So I think I was mentally molded and prepared. But I'm grateful to be a legacy. a prodigy, a product of my dad knowing that he needed to instill being a THPO into somebody, and what better than a child, somebody that you're going to raise, and knowing that I would do it to another person, my nieces or my nephews, because it's always for the ones yet to be born. It's never about us. It's not about us or the ones that are walking the earth now. So I lost my dad in May 2021. But more than ever, since after I lost my dad, did sacred objects, sacred places, did stone features, sacred sites mean something more to me? Did I ever have to believe in sites in my culture more when I lost my dad? I believe that a lot of the direction and the guidance and the random meeting people to have these opportunities, I'd like to hope that it comes from something greater than us, that somebody in the crowd has to hear it. And in hopes that you guys share it within your profession or your educational backgrounds, your peers, your students, or it could be something that you're specifically going through work, or a relation with another person or a collection or institution, so I hope that there are no coincidences, that all of you are here for a purpose, for a reason, and that it means something to you. So specifically for this, I made this cradle board when I was 21 years old. At that time, I was going through health problems, and I was told that I wasn't going to be able to have kids, so I did. I took cultural practices, and I gave myself hope, even as I don't want to give out my age, but it's quite some time ago. But this is the perfect example of embedded generational knowledge. And this is also symbolic for everything that I hold, all the little knowledge that I carry, and the representation of my people. This is all that I do is for the ones that are yet to be born, even if they're not here yet. Even if I go through life and don't have my own child, this is going to be filled by somebody. Someone's going to be special and be able to be in this, and I'll wait for that. I'll keep doing what I have to do for this. So I'll pass this around after if you guys want to take a look at it, but I did want to bring something from home. This is also in my office, and the kids, try to put it on and they probably tip back some because it's pretty heavy. But I never want our babies to be afraid of objects. When they come into the museum, never want them to be afraid. I know that when our families, even myself, going into like the Smithsonian, and you have like all the glass cases and we're just looking, and somebody else not from our culture is talking about them, is an expert about it, that's fine. But I want to eliminate that environment when they come into our museum, their museum, the next generation's museum, so all of the work and the time is based on that. What can I do proactively for them, by them, and it's all for them. So yeah, so I hope there's questions. What
Oh,
okay.
Who has a question?
What time are
Dan, thank you so much. I have a question about this theme that you mentioned a couple times, sort of, I guess, about the conflict between science and traditional culture. How do you see there being a really productive reconciliation between those two different frameworks?
Really good example. There's a museum called the Spectrum Museum in Missoula, and they posed the same question because I gave them the same answer. So in a science museum, coming to visit my museum and saying, how can we influence some culture in our science? And I said, a really good example is where science can also encourage a cultural practice. So what we've come up with in a collaborative effort is like the whirlwind. Her name is fighting between all four winds. So in a science museum, they're trying to figure out, how do we make 4 buttons make 4 types of wind to make a whirlwind? And then each of those buttons will have a face of like 4 men. And the point of the whirlwind, or what we call a dust devil, is she can't make up her mind between these 4 men. So she creates chaos. She creates chaos between herself, and she takes apart things almost like a tornado. So to imagine putting that cultural perspective in a science museum, and making it enjoyable for kids. So it's not only you're utilizing science, but what's the story behind the science instead of what's the science behind the story. It's reversing it. And all obviously starting with the little ones, the kids who are sponges and want to know more. They're hungry for that. So that's a really great example. So I'll let you all know when that happens because I want to try to design it too.
Thank you so much.
Other questions?
Dyan, thank you again for your time. I liked your story of having the bed next to your father's desk, because it seems to me there's so much good to do and so many things for you to do. Where do you see putting your efforts, and how do you decide where you're going to be, what you're going to be doing next?
So the biggest goal that I have is, and this was before Deb Holland, but I knew that being at that level of a Department of Interior secretary to change policies, because I work with a lot of people that are boots on the ground, the archaeologists, consultants that are following policies and protocols, whichever in the CRM world. But I want to be at a level where I can influence that to make it easier and better for communication, where there's too many middle people, or there's people that maybe could be doing extra or more, and they're doing less or not enough, or they're in positions where they can be directed in another way to help CRM. So being at that level is always the goal. I know it's just going to take some time to get there, but I know that for a fact, and right now what I'm working on is I don't want to be a hypocrite, and I don't want the Fort Peck tribes to be a hypocrite of what we're practicing or what we're preaching to agencies. So if we're telling agencies you need to have a manual, a protocol, a policy that better suits CRM, we want to practice it first on the Indian reservation so that we can share that and show it, and so that I have something that an agency can parallel. So working on ourselves first and make sure that it works for us so that we can implement it and show it and give it to somebody else to parallel, or even integrate it into their policy or their changes. But I know if we don't work on it ourselves, we can't be a hypocrite to other places. So definitely working on ourselves. That's one of the biggest goals now, that I see in our short term, and then practicing it long term.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, thanks for coming.
Hello.
Could you tell us briefly? I'm sure this could take an hour, but who the tribes at Fort Peck are, and their histories, briefly.
Sure. Man. In a nutshell, so we house the Lakota, Dakota, and Nakota people. In a quick nutshell, Ochechi is based upon 7 major bands, and they're all Sioux under the Lakota, Dakota, Nakota. Many of them have their own reservations throughout Minnesota, South Dakota, and North Dakota. At a time of the Minnesota uprising and thereafter, there was nuclear families that left each of these bands and moved into Montana, which were trying to flee into Canada. So many of these reservations that are in the Dakotas and Minnesota, we have small families that left them and were sent in, were took off into Canada, and then were sent out of Canada, which is why we're now held in captive existence in the top corner of northeast Montana and on the border of North Dakota. But the time of that, we have direct relatives, like we have cousins, second cousins living in Standing Rock, Sisseton, Spirit Lake. We have Cheyenne River relatives. We even have Cheyenne relatives. During that time of having allies with other people, Fort Peck was created in 1886. In 1868 was a Fort Laramie Treaty where established other Sioux tribes, reservations. We were way after. We were still the renegades, last to surrender. So in 1886 was the reservation period. That's when it was established, the Sweet Grass Hills Treaty. And then in 1888, it was ratified to our 2.4 million acres, what it is now. So we have Nakota fluent speakers, Dakota fluent speakers, and some Lakota fluent speakers on the reservation. And a side note, really proud moment. I don't know if he's watching, but my brother Justin Greyhawk is one of the first chairmen that were just elected and inaugurated on Monday. He's a fluent speaker. He taught at the college level, a traditional practitioner, helps me in the cultural resource department. He sat on council for 6+ years. So we have somebody in cultural preservation that is now our chairman, and so we hope for good things for our department and huge success and hopefully nationwide. Yes, good job for him.
Who else has a question?
I was wondering, what do you think about upcoming possible changes to NAGPRA? I haven't been following it that closely, but I know one thing I heard about was potentially imposing timelines on the process or like a deadline. Just was curious what you thought about that and more generally how you think that process is going.
So I know I'm going to get some heat about this, but I value people who help create the NAGPRA, but I also feel that it sort of failed us in some of the verbiage that you're talking about. I feel that in some parts it wasn't meant for us to succeed at it. But I'll tell you why. An example, going to an institution who was not meeting a timeline or a time frame and saying, we've been consulting all this time, we've been waiting to get our things back. and then just taking it upon ourselves to go and retrieve those things ourselves, knock on a door and say, we're waiting, we want to come home with something, and creating a transfer of control agreement with an institution. And it's not necessarily bypassing NAGPRA, but it's a different direction, and especially when those items are specific to a tribe, I don't see why that can't be the process. I understand when there's other items that are affiliated with multiple tribes, then maybe those need to hold on for a NAGPRA process. But when people and institutions have specific things to Fort Peck tribes, then why isn't that available under a NAGPRA process to go and grab those out of a transfer of control? Because they belong to us. We are property owners, and I don't like that word, but we're property owners of those. So if language was to change, I would like it to specifically change to those that are cataloged already, those that already have a provenience saying it belongs to so-and-so, a specific person or a location, and that be sped up by people being able to go and capture those now. Instead of waiting for the multitude of Federal Register notices that not everybody is zooming through those, at a time-consuming rate. So hopefully that does change. If not the change in policy or in law, then hopefully the change in institutions and museums and archival repositories for sure.
Other questions?
So whenever you're talking about asking the sites if they, so whenever you're like asking the sites what they want, is it like leading to like the spirit of the site or the spirits of those remaining that reside in the site?
So the main questions when my field staff, when they, great question. When my field staff walk upon a stone feature, rocks that are embedded in the ground, whether it be an effigy or just a circle or a stack of rocks, there's a multitude, we call them types. We don't know what type they are, what type of ceremony it is, what type of burial it was, what type of time frame it was, solstice, winter, summer, an alignment, star alignment, sky alignment. We don't necessarily know that, but we have a general idea of how to categorize it. But it's when my field staff walk up to a site and something stops them, or they feel something there, like, Dyan, do you know what this one means? It kind of has this funny thing. They start describing it somehow, something that interests them or piques their interest. And no, I don't know what everything is. But we have protocols. Remember, your very first teaching is to remember your cultural practice. So first, you grab tobacco or food and you pay homage. Paying homage to the site itself is the existence of the site. That's just that. And then when you speak to it, it's to whatever had created the site. So each stone, this is just one. This is just one of hundreds of millions of ways to interpret a site. So that's how vague and broad this is going to be. But one interpretation of what I tell my field staff and partnering agencies who only take care of these sites, inside of a circle, we created a pile of rocks. And in the time of creating a site, anything that comes, it could be the wind that comes from a certain direction and you place a stone there. And then it could be a little dragonfly coming from another direction, you place it there. But each one of these things that come is a deity, or it's something of the natural world, and it contributes to what you're doing there in the first place. You're asking a question, or you're seeking clarity, or you're in a sacrificing of wanting or needing knowledge for your people or for something of a greater good. So each one of these stones represent something that had come, to this person, this entity, or whichever. or it could have been made in a natural world. In a science geological way, it's like rock formations coming out in a various way, or I forgot the actual term for it, just a natural rock formation, but it's made into a circle. Some of those are the oldest sites because people weren't carrying 10-pound rocks across the Great Plains. So just acknowledging the existence of it first, thanking it that it got to exist, it's not disturbed, and then acknowledging whoever created it, contributing to that. And then, should you really want to know, should you really be ready to hear what that site has to say, then asking it for gentle knowledge. Gentle knowledge that it doesn't come with like a life-hitting lesson, like this is what the site meant, and something that may hurt. Let it come in through like a dream. Let it show you in a dream that somebody that made this site, maybe they wanted to be a better dad. Maybe they at one point they asked creator, I want to be a better dad. I want to be a better man. How do I accomplish this? Show me, humble me, or whichever. So everybody that walks by there, maybe it was one of the men in my field staff that walked up to it and felt something because they needed to. Maybe that's what it was talking to. Maybe that's what they needed to feel. That's what they needed to see. And it happens for a reason. So if one of them asked me that, I almost have to believe that site was created for something that they came across that relates to them. So that's what they pay homage to. The existence, who created it, the purpose of its creation, but also to ask it for the gentle knowledge to come back, that it doesn't hurt them. So hopefully in a whole a whole range of knowledge. And sometimes it does. Well, sometimes I don't think they share, after it happens, but a lot of times it does come through a dream, or they do have this type of vision or a feeling after, and sometimes they stop asking too after that. But yep.
Other questions?
Thank you very much. I want to go back to the first question about culture and science, and and it's a question, invitation, and you feel free to ignore it and move on. As I was listening to you, connecting the question of culture, ancestors, children, generations, object, and land, I was reminded by a tweet by Elon Musk today, who is a cultural icon of our time, for better or worse, who said something like, commenting on what is happening in the Middle East, and I'm an anthropologist of Middle East. He said, we care more about land than we care about humans. And he was commenting, I assume, that the conflict in Israel-Palestine is over land, and people are losing their lives, perhaps on both sides, but we should care about humans as opposed to land. I was wondering what you would say about that, or the limit of the way our secular scientific way of valorizing human life is sort of limited. I'll just leave it there. Thank you.
Yes. I believe when it comes to, and I can only speak on protecting sacred sites, land. I do care about the land. I also know that people are impacts to the land. It's the people who create these adverse effects to the land. As they pile up, people are creating adverse effects to sites, the natural world, plants. Even people try to manipulate what a restoration project is. It can never go back to the way it was. Pristine prairies can never go back after someone put a road there, sort of demolished a lot of imprints, and then took it out and say, let's try to regrow it back to the way it was. There's always going to be a scar there, a vegetated scar. It'll never go back. I think that development, the reach for development, it comes from people. The land doesn't develop its own buildings. The land doesn't grow skyscrapers. It's not the land, it's the people. The people create these. They create the imprints on a land. They create the justification to need more housing, more buildings, more parks, more water parks, entertainment, tourist attractions. And I felt this way that even in places that we think that we're protecting, even if they're in pristine places, they also are suffocating. The land is suffocating from policies that is influenced by people, by humans. So we can't even leave a piece of land alone because it's so protected and preserved by policies and manuals, and if the weeds get too high, this is how you cut them. It is. The humans have such an impact and create adverse effects. It's also humans who create manipulative environments and ecosystems because of what they cause already. One example that last week that I learned is that ships come in and out of a lot of the bays, and they create these waves, and they sort of have either destroyed coral reefs or created these places where the banks are caving in, so they don't have money for the bank stabilizations, but they don't have money to stop the ships from coming in and out either. So one of the resiliency plans by humans were to create fake coral reefs and see how it accepts, and there's some crabs that go in there. There's some growth on top of there, small fish go in there. But at what point, and this is just from a CRM perspective and a THPO perspective, but at what point are humans creating the adverse effects and then creating the manipulated environments, and then not accepting where do ethics stand? When is it not ethical to manipulate somebody's home, somebody's creation? Does it sound different to a crab to have cemented coral reefs? Does it feel different? Does it smell different? Does it look different? But this is all that they have in shelter. So the things that are so small, even the bacteria to the microorganisms in the land, the things that break us down when we believe that we're buried and we go back into earth, that's what's important to us. Because once the breakdown is there and we walk across the Milky Way, those are things that I hope that are not manipulated by people. At one point, I wouldn't want Mr. Musk to move and shift the Milky Way, because then that's an adverse effect to when I go to the other side. Man does that. Humans do that. Women do that. So humans, just in general, they create adverse effects. And more than ever have I seen it in my job and with people who are decision makers. And that's kind of scary, but I would protect the land, especially for these ones that have yet to be born. I want them to have a land to walk on. I want them to have grass, real grass, not sludge or fake grass that turns your toes green, because it's painted green. I want them to have real water, not fake water, filtered water, real systems, real trees, not groves, ones that fell naturally. It's the land. And I would care about the land more so because I have other people coming, other ones yet to be born. And the humans here, hopefully we can work better together for the natural world. But it would be all for the land.
We've got time for one more question. Do we have one more question?
Thank you so much for your time. I just had a question kind of building off the first. As a non-Indigenous archaeologist, would you have any suggestions for how we could work to reconcile the epistemological differences between, I guess, more mainstream scientific thought and more cultural interpretations?
Like for yourself in your future journey?
Yes, ma'am.
I don't know how accepted it is now, but definitely for Fort Peck, if you ever want to come visit us, I could probably show you better than I could tell you. But I've always been curious of the idea, and this goes to my dad encouraging me to step into professions where we thought it was hurting us, so anthropology, museum, curating. I asked him one time, like, why do tribes have to do the academia journey in order to bridge the gap for other people to understand us? Why haven't people come to our homelands, our ceremonies? Haven't they participated when I know that they can influence the future of our cultural practices by policies, laws, and why hasn't that happened? In through experience, I've noticed that there's a lot of, well, they're not accepted, they're not of the bloodline, they can't witness. But I think that's changing now. I think as much as Indigenous archaeology, anthropology perspective has been influencing anthropology in general, I see that perspective opening, but also I see that there's more acceptance to people, non-tribal people, being accepted, making friends, and then being invited to ceremonies. More so have I seen people being invited to witness. Non-Lakota, Dakota, Nakota people are coming to our ceremonies and saying, it's so beautiful. I felt something. Please let me know how I can help again. Where can I bring food next time? Making relations with our friends, our families, and then also being an accepted person. Learning songs even, learning small pieces of language. I think if you are exploring something into another walk of life, another background, I don't think research should just be limited to just books or an author that wrote about them. I think the most part, just like a tribal person has to step into a profession, because there is no ceremony on anthropology. If there was, I missed it in my undergrad. But there is a ceremony on how a site is created. There is a ceremony on a Sundance, a sweat lodge, and many people from different walks of life have practiced that or witnessed it or even helped with it, just to understand a little bit. So I think moving into those places, those spaces, making those relations and that good communication, being transparent. And the end goal is to be culturally competent, and be confident that you're doing your best to understand a people's, a group, a region, and that you're looking at every resource to better your understanding and open up a bigger perspective of somebody else, different eyes, different views, and always to accept that you can question it in your own head, yes, and ask some of these questions, but remember, you can't influence that. And I think that's where a lot of people get hurt, is that they think when they step in, well, but why do you guys do it like that? Wouldn't it be easier if they make a tool now, or they do this now? No, it's people still want to do cultural practices, historic practices, because that's what grounds us and that's what makes us who we are today. I know that they sell something like this in Walmart. I know that there's a front carrier. I know that there's a baby stroller and a car seat. this is your all-in-one, your 4-in-1. And I can trek this across TSA into the airport without having to lug around a big baby carrier and a ticket bag. So there's things like this that are always going to happen. You know, there's not going to be this big jump and change to, yes, I know there's something easier, but this is all I know. This is what I want to know. This is what works for us. You know, it doesn't just make us unique. This is something that helps the baby, you know, the baby grow. Every design, everything that's a part of this means something to their identity, you know. So just remember that in exploring other people's, you know. Yay.
Great note to leave it on. Thank y'all again for being here, and thank you, Dyan. Let's give her another round of applause. Appreciate you. Did you all have any closing announcements? Okay.
Dan, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I just want to say that I'm very pleased that you are our speaker after a long hiatus for the Stigler Lecture Series. Through the COVID-19 pandemic, there was a pause, and I'm really happy to have it be reactivated with everything that you've shared with us today and the great insight and thought-provoking words. So thank you so much. And as a token of our appreciation, a small one that is, we got you a little gift.
Oh, cute.
It's Molly organized it, so please direct your thanks to her.
Thank
I'm just the messenger.
Nice.
Oh, here, let me get that for you.
Yes. Well,
And thank you, everyone, for coming.
yes, thank you guys for coming. You guys are more than welcome to come up and come look, come touch, feel how heavy it is.
And there's one more thing I want to add. For those in the room, we have some refreshments, so please take some bites to eat, take a bottle of water, and I think you'll be available for some conversations and more questions.